Hi, it's Kyle. Rare Disease Day is right around the corner, February 28th. Right now, we're in Rare Disease Month. It's a time to celebrate the stories that make a difference in awareness, advocacy, drug development, friendship, and fortitude. One of those is the story of how John Crowley and his family responded when they were diagnosed with Pompe disease. In recognition of Rare Disease Month, we're bringing you a conversation that we first published in May of 2024.
Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react.
Well, Kyle, I know this may be an unfair assumption, but I assume everybody in the world, or specifically everybody in the rare disease community, knows John Crowley. As he mentions in the interview books, the movie Extraordinary Measures was inspired by him and his family. So John has just been a tremendous player, if you will, in the biotech pharma, patient advocacy space for rare disease. And he was gracious enough to come back on the show with us recently from the backseat of a car. So we had to squeeze it in, but I'm so grateful that he was willing to do this. And also, as a note for listeners, the audio might not be the most fantastic, but you have an idea of, Kyle and I are sitting at our fancy microphones, and John's getting work done in the backseat of a car on the way to a different appointment. So, John, we're thankful that you made it work.
It's the content that counts, I think, not the sound, right? And we were blown away and grateful for the conversation.
So please enjoy our conversation with the one and only John Crowley. John, we are so excited to have you back on the show. It's been 100 episodes. You joined us way back in episode 144. We're now somewhere around the 250 mark. John Crowley, we're so excited that you're back on with us. Welcome back.
It is great to be back, and I'm so pleased and so proud of the work that you guys do to highlight so many great stories and journeys and just to humanize all of this. And it's great to see you guys on Zoom as well. You both look great. Kyle is still by far the better looking of the two, but it's good to see you both.
Fair.
Yeah, Kyle wrote that for me to say, so I have.
Yeah, I'll send you Venmo later.
$20.
Yeah.
I've been looking forward to today's conversation because we've crossed paths quite a bit over the years. We've shared some panel conversations and we've done some events with the Amicus, and we've always had a blast. And when we interviewed you individually, you were gracious enough to come on and help educate us and listeners about the drug development process. And what I'm excited about today is getting more on the personal side of John and the Crowley family and who you are and maybe why you're in this space today. So do you mind giving us a snapshot of how you got into the rare disease space?
Yeah, it wasn't my dream when I was a little kid to grow up and be a biotechnology entrepreneur and CEO. I kid around with people that when I was a kid, every Halloween, I didn't dress up as a biotech CEO, right? I was a cop or a Navy fighter pilot or something way more fun. But when you think about, what life brings you, right? You guys didn't plan on this journey. Many of us in this space didn't, all of us in many ways didn't plan on it. And, we came into the rare disease space in long time ago now, in 1998, when our then 15-month-old daughter, Megan, was diagnosed with this rare form of muscular dystrophy, muscular disease known as Pompe disease. Rare lysosomal storage disorder. We were told that And by that point, Megan, other than not walking, and that was my greatest fear once we started seeing it about a year that something wasn't quite right with Megan's muscles. My greatest fear was that we'd be told she may need a wheelchair. She may not be able to walk. And it was quite worse than that. The physician told us that she had this rare form of a muscular dystrophy, wouldn't live to be a couple of years old, and that we should have our then 7-day-old son, Patrick, tested because there's a 1 in 4 chance he could have the disease. And, we did. We ended up having Patrick tested shortly after, and he had it as well. We have an older son, John, who was unaffected with the disease, but all of a sudden, in a very short period of time, your life changes with that diagnosis. And like all of us on this journey, you go through a lot of emotions. And for us, we settled on determined to learn everything we could about this disease. And I'm not a scientist or a physician, but I had to get pretty smart in this stuff pretty quick. And then determined to learn everything we could about who may have an answer or an opportunity. And that led us into the world of science and medicine. And I won't relive all of that. There's a couple of books and a pretty good movie about it.
Yeah.
So you can take a look at that. But, the upshot is that in about 5 years of not-for-profit research and then starting a small little biotech company and then discovering technology for an enzyme replacement therapy to replace the defective enzyme for the kids, they were able to, while they got much weaker and much sicker when they were very young, needing wheelchairs and ventilators, we were able to get them a life-saving enzyme therapy and every other week therapy that they began on in 2003. So again, a long time ago, that reversed the dangerous enlargement of their hearts, provided them some additional strength, and, in many ways gave them quality of life, gave us time, but also gave we in the medical research community a chance to go back and think about what's next and what could we do better. And that's an important lesson I'd like to come back to. So that was the journey in many ways of into diagnosis and medicine and starting a small company and finding a therapy and saving lives, including our own children, but then also realizing we could do better. And that's kind of what led me to Amicus that I'm sure we'll come to. But that in about a couple of minutes is a summary of a very challenging 5 years of our life.
Yeah. John, if you don't mind, what were your dreams before this? Because, I love the example of John Crowley because there's a lot of parents that are faced with this, obviously, right? And they're like, what the heck do we do? So what was your science background? What was your, business development background before this happened?
Well, but, I was young. I was in my early 30s when the kids were diagnosed. And by that point, was blessed to have a great education, a law degree, a business degree, spent some time in the Navy. But nothing prepares you for this emotionally, spiritually, professionally. Science and medicine. I was terrible at science. At the Naval Academy, I got a 19 on my final exam in chemistry. I still think I missed some of the bubbles and screwed it up. I don't think I did that badly, but regardless,
That certainly makes me
my
feel better because I feel like I'd be in the same boat.
Yep.
you know what? But think what you guys did, right? What you've had to learn because you had to, and I did eventually because I got into realizing that even the not-for-profit world, and we had so many friends and family step up to help.
Yeah.
It wasn't going to be enough, and it wasn't going to be fast enough because time was as great an enemy as the mistakes of nature. So for us, we realized that we needed to do something pretty extraordinary. In some ways, we had everything to lose. In some ways, we had nothing to lose.
Mm-hmm.
And more than anything, I didn't want to look back years later and wished we'd done something different.
Yeah.
And so we kind of went all in and helped start a small little biotech company with a home equity loan and cash advances on a credit card and some angel investors and then venture investors. And eventually, and that was a very short period of time. But again, I didn't learn that in business school. I candidly kind of made it up as I went along. And maybe that's reasons why it worked because I didn't know what the template was for starting in a biotech company. I looked at it from the perspective of a dad trying to save his kids. And so we made a lot of mistakes, probably took some risks I never should have taken. But, with a lot of people's help, I think in some ways we did something pretty extraordinary.
Absolutely.
And we got lucky too. there's an element of that to always be
Sure.
thankful
Mhm.
for.
I think a lot of people would agree. You did something right. So kudos to you for taking the risk. I'm curious, you were up against the clock, your whole family was. So when you got the diagnosis, can you give us an idea of how long it took before you decided to just change the course of life? Was that a couple hours, couple days, couple of weeks? I mean, I feel like it was probably quick, but I don't know.
It was by that night
Wow.
I went online and I started looking, and the doctor, very caring neurologist, told us, "I'm sorry, there's nothing that we can do. Enjoy the time you have." And with a 15-month-old and a 7-month-old or a 7-day-old, I literally went online that night before Google even existed, some early search engines. And I remember finding a research paper just published out of Duke University with the Dr. Y.T. Chen and his team that had taken a naturally occurring animal model of Pompe disease in Japanese quail for whatever reasons of nature, where they had made a lab-based enzyme therapy and had changed the course of the disease in the animal. And finally, I remember I lean up and rattling off the abstract. I didn't even know most of what it meant. And she looked at me in the middle of the night. It was like 2 a.m. and said, what do you, after a very long emotional day, so what do you mean? What are you talking about? And I just remember telling her, Eileen, I think it means that there may be some hope.
Mhm.
And by the weekend, I went to the library and pulled books. And by Monday morning, was talking to a researcher in the Netherlands, another doctor who was doing some research online in Pompe. And that gave us that small measure of hope. And that's always something I've learned over the years, so important for anybody struggling with a health challenge.
Mm.
You've got to provide, we as a community have to provide some measure of hope. Even in those cases where there is no drug, no technology even, very few or any researchers, just to know there's others like you. And it may only be a handful of families sometimes. Just that hope that there's somebody who cares, somebody who wants to see that small part of the world change every bit as much as you do. And if you're lucky, maybe some brilliant scientists and researchers who want to join you along this way, on the journey.
John, can we fast forward maybe 25 years or so? Can you give us and our listeners an update on where the kids are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So that original medicine they took every other week fixed the dangerous enlargement of their hearts. Their hearts have always been now perfectly healthy and normal. They got the medicine late in life, so they had significant muscle damage already. They required ventilators and wheelchairs. The disease never affects the mind like most muscle diseases. So they went through public K through 12. Megan ended up going on to the University of Notre Dame undergrad and finished with a double major in 4 years, living in the dorm with friends, RAs, nurses, family members helping her along the way. Went on to get a master's in social work from UNC Chapel Hill. Megan is now 27. Patrick is now 26. Megan works full-time for the Make-A-Wish Foundation of New Jersey as I got to make sure I get the title right or she gets really mad at me. The Assistant Director of Mission Integration.
Wow.
So she does a lot of work at Make-A-Wish, and it's, part of her heart and soul. And Patrick, all kids take different journeys, and you want your kids to be happy, safe, fulfilled. He works in a flower store in New Jersey that's staffed by all people with disabilities called Baseball Flowers, and he derives great meaning from that. And then we have an older son, John, who's not affected with Pompe, as you guys know, but John lives with high-functioning autism. And Megan will tell you he's more work effort, Megan and Patrick combined, and made his way through school, made his way through college, kind of awkward like a lot of people on the spectrum, socially not particularly adept, but made his way through. And during COVID, one of Megan's nurses moved in with us. Well, she and John went on a lot of hikes and movies and found their way to each other and love and got married a few years ago. And we now have a almost 2-year-old granddaughter, Stella.
Wow.
So,
I did not know that. That is so cool.
In life, right?
Love
so I'm now Grandpa. Papa.
That is
Congratulations.
great. Grandpa
And
John.
That's she's been such a blessing.
When you think about your children, there's some pretty exciting stuff to even make it to, say, 13, 18, to be able to go to college and live with friends and do all the things that quote-unquote normal kids might do.
Yeah.
What's one or two things that you're just so proud of?
One is what you notice, we saw it with our kids and through some really tough times. I mean, before the medicine, Megan in the intensive care unit for 6 weeks as a 21-month-old, just watching that resilience of a baby, really. And then as a young lady, spending 7 weeks at age 16 in the intensive care unit, going through multiple spinal surgeries. You see the toughness, the persistence for sure, which is such inspiration. And I don't use that word lightly, but it really helps put perspective for all of us, particularly we able-bodied people, to think about, how do you live and what do you really focus on? What are the real challenges in life related to that? The other thing we've always been amazed by and proud of is great sense of optimism. I remember when Megan was little, we always had this routine. I mean, getting ready in the morning, we had this crazy house and nurses come in, and somewhere along the way, we thought it was a good idea to get 2 Jack Russell puppies because there wasn't enough going on. It was always kind of just bedlam in the house in the morning. And Megan always, before she get on the school bus, would come in and check on me, and I would come check on her. And I would always ask her every day, Megan, how are you doing today? And she would answer me with the same one-word answer every day for years and years, no matter, whether she's having difficulty in a classroom or whether she was sick, whatever it is, no matter what, she would always answer with the one word, awesome. I'm awesome. And one is from a little kid in a wheelchair. And I guarantee, I tell people, if you saw Megan now or back then as a young lady in a wheelchair, on a ventilator, going to school or going down the street or whatever, and I asked you to write 10, 20, 100 adjectives to describe her, you probably wouldn't pick the word awesome.
Yeah.
But that's how she sees herself. And it's also the way she wants her life projected to others, realizing, of course, it's not awesome every day. And it's a challenge that most of us could imagine every day. But that's what she wants people to see. And that's something that I take away and I see others take away. And that's something you can't teach, but it's something as a parent you can be obviously just enormously proud of.
Yeah.
Do you think that's something she developed because of her situation, or do you think it's something that's just in her, whether she had a disability like this or not?
Probably both for Megan. So you're getting kind of the nature versus nurture argument.
Right.
I put it on both. I think she's just a tough kid by nature. Literally, the day she was born, we didn't know it at the time that there was some underlying issues, but she had to go to the NICU for a few hours. She was tough and feisty the day she was born.
Yeah.
And, when she was 21-month-old, fighting for a life that they told her she'd never survive. And she did. So there's something innate. But it's also something learned. And you have to think for Patrick and Megan, and for a lot of kids with special needs, extraordinary needs, they're never out of eyesight or earshot of an adult their whole life. So that, just learning from adults and seeing that brings a different level of maturity earlier in life that I think probably contributed to some of that perspective. In some ways, she had to grow up a lot faster than most kids do.
Yeah. Well, she had a wonderful example to grow up by.
Yeah, her mom's great. Her mom is great.
Yeah, in her mother. That's exactly what I was thinking.
I know. I figured I'd jump you on that. I'm just along for the ride. My old age as a grandpa, now they just look on me like a kind of like a lovable idiot. So it's okay.
Love that. So you mentioned Amicus, and you and your wife and some other families went all in and began being a part of the research and being a part of the solution. You had made the comment, what's next? What can we do better? Can we go back to that? And can you expand on what you did next? Now that you've got a completely different life ahead of you, What were some of the things that were important to you to tackle?
Yeah, it's interesting too, Sean. You think about, that first company was just 18 months start to finish, and then another year and a half for me at the larger company, Genzyme, that had purchased that first company. And then I thought maybe that was just an acute entry into biotech, and I'd step away and do other things. And in some ways I did do some not-for-profit work through going back in the Navy Reserve and doing some active duty deployments. But I realized too, particularly as our kids within the first year plateaued on that first therapy, I realized that we needed to do better for Pompe. But I also met so many families and came to realize the extent of the unmet need in the world of rare diseases. Now, of course, with over 10,000 rare diseases affecting worldwide, as you know, hundreds of millions of people with very, very few treatments approved. So, I met some folks who were starting a rare disease company and had asked me to join as CEO in 2005. And having had a first company that had some measure of success, it was something I became excited about and realized that this is going to be a life journey for us. And for me, more than a job, more than a career, almost a big vocation of sorts. And so we started Amicus. We chose the Latin word for friend. We wanted to be the most patient-centered, patient-friendly company in all of biotechnology. And you guys have seen many ways that Amicus lives that. And I think really has set the standard of what patient centricity is all about. It's a mindset, a way of thinking that with every decision, if you had this disease, whatever it may be, or you're the mom or a dad of a child with a particular disorder, how would you make your decisions? When would you start a program, stop a program? Where would you allocate funding? Who would you hire? It's a mindset, and it takes time to build that into every part of your organization. And so now I will really fast forward and tell you in my 19 plus years at Amicus, we grew the company from a handful of us to now nearly 600 people around the world with a couple of approved therapies and Fabry disease, and then also a next generation approach in Pompe disease that just got approved last year around the world in major countries, including Europe and the United States, and is now helping hundreds of patients. So it's great to have yet another treatment option for people living with Pompe. Still not a cure and far from it, but again, time, quality of life, and then time for the scientists and the development leaders to go back to the drawing board and think what's new. When we got to the point where Amicus had operations in dozens of countries and 600 people and multiple development programs, and it was a company worth over $3 billion, and we'd built something lasting and enduring, and hopefully with much greater impact ahead under Bradley Campbell's leadership. My great friend and business partner who has succeeded me now as CEO in the summer of 2022. And I became a very active executive chair and sat on a number of other biotech boards. I started to think about, well, what's next? I've been very active in BIO, the Biotechnology Innovation Organization, our industry trade association, based here in the United States, but with an international reach as well. And, over 1,000 member companies and a staff of over 160. I was on the board, and we were looking for a permanent CEO, and conversation developed about whether I might consider it. And so back in the late part of 2023 last year, I agreed that I would do it. I'd step in and become a long-term CEO at BIO. And I think in this role, I can have a unique position to shape policies, to shape laws, perspectives on Capitol Hill, in each of the states, and within our industry, and shape behaviors that advance biomedical research and not only bring newer and better medicines to people, but realize the urgency of time. And so I committed to it. I started March 5th as the BIO CEO, and it's been a very busy, short, but very busy time. And it's something I'm excited about. We've got a great team and something I think we could have enormous impact in shaping the ecosystem for really what is now cusp of the golden age of medicine. So something I'm excited about and look forward to continuing to run for many years ahead.
John, you talk about that patient-centered mindset, and that's an incredible thing to bring to an organization that is a touch point for so many global biotech organizations. How do you implement that mindset in so many different companies and ecosystems and cultures and everything that goes along with a world global organization?
Well, I think for us, we start within the walls of bio. For our team, our organization, we're based in Washington, D.C. So that's kind of the center of policy and lawmaking, obviously, and advocacy. So a couple of things. One, very visible, and you guys have been to the Amicus headquarters and other companies working in this space. We're taking down all the beautiful artwork in our offices, and we're putting up artwork done by people living with diseases and disorders. We're putting up portraits of people together with their stories. We just initiated our Patient Perspective series. But every 2 to 3 weeks, we're bringing in a family. And at some point, we'll have you guys down to Washington and to just share your journey, your story, to humanize the I say the patient perspective, but when you live, like for you guys, you live with a disorder. It's the way nature and God made you. And this is just your journey in life. And we're all made differently. And we all have health challenges to different levels of severity and at different times of our life. But every one of us has a family member or a friend who has an extraordinary challenge, life-threatening challenge, or lost family members, and seen the enormous amount of suffering that comes with these health challenges. And so that's part of what we'll bring to bio. We'll also bring it to our events. We put together this wonderful convention every year. More than 20,000 attendees. It is the marquee event in science and biotechnology. It's called Bio. This year we'll be in San Diego. 2025 we'll go back to Boston. And you'll see an enhanced focus on the patient voice, patient centricity in the months and years ahead. And then we'll discuss it at our board meetings. Bio has a unique role as a convener in the industry, bringing in small companies, large companies, contract research organizations, medical research institutes, the FDA, the NIH, everything involved in what we call this virtuous circle of innovation, with always putting people living with these disorders, patients, at the center of that circle. We have a unique ability to bring that together and to foster that conversation and to think not only about making great medicines, but how do we ensure universal access, ultimately worldwide? And think about that even within the United States. Let's identify barriers to access. If we have great medicines, but we don't have every single person in need having access, we will have failed.
Yep.
We need to make sure that nobody ever goes one day without their medicine. So what are the barriers? Think about the economic barriers, ability to pay for medicines, the co-pays, the out-of-pockets, the deductibles, the co-insurance. Let's look at that whole system and make sure that everybody can afford their medicines and their co-pays. Let's think about education. People don't even know what technologies, medicines may exist. You see great disparities based on geography, on race, of course, in terms of access to medicine, but even gender. You think about women's healthcare, and not just the women's specific healthcare issues, the endometriosis or cervical cancer. Those are very important. But beyond those, to think about autoimmune diseases, which disproportionately affect women, the level of funding and research for women-specific or women-predominant orders, we are dramatically underinvesting. So let's think about that as a barrier to access. So these are the things that I and the bio organization can play a very unique role in bringing pieces of this ecosystem together to not only make sure we continue to make newer and better medicines, but that we get them to everybody.
I love that I hear you saying it's an opportunity. All these challenges are an opportunity, and that's what I see in a lot of the stuff. The way you talk, you see a challenge, and even in your family too, and Megan and Patrick and John, they see an opportunity in the challenges, and I just love that.
It is, right? Every issue that we look at is both a challenge and an opportunity.
John, just hear you talking is encouraging because a lot of families know, a lot of our listeners know, it's an uphill battle in many ways, whether it's, a treatment that's far off or, better yet, a cure is a long ways away, research is expensive. Access to care is expensive, and for some, there's so much, policy. All of it. It's an uphill battle in a sense. But there are so many people like you, like maybe us, and so many others that every day get out of bed and just chip away at whatever those struggles might be. And you talk about having a grandbaby. Now you're probably at least in your 40s, whatever it may be.
You're very kind.
What keeps you chipping away at this stuff even today when you've accomplished so much, when you've had so much more time with your family? Somebody from the outside could look and say, okay, you've done enough. Well, what is it for John Crowley? What would you identify as a motivating factor to keep pushing?
Oh, you don't need it. You just look at all the people we work with every day. We're just beginning in this. You're very kind to say I'm in my 40s. I'm closer to 60 now than 50. So, but I'll never retire. This is lifelong mission. There's so much to do. I look out 5, 10, 20, 25 years about what we can do in healthcare and medicine, certainly in the rare diseases, but broad societal issues that we're struggling with. You look at challenges like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, cancer. We finally have it within our grasp to really change all of that. And in a way that we've never been able to before, to extend and enhance human life. And if I could play some small role in that, it's a real privilege and an honor. Plus, my daughter Megan's just way too expensive, so I can't retire. Even though she makes a really good living right now, and she is a ferocious saver with Megan's own money, not so much with mine.
Sure, of course. Well, I will echo something you just said. As a patient or an individual in the space, we're glad and excited to have somebody like you and the people that surround you continuing to lead for change in our world.
Yeah. Well, you guys are at the tip of the spear. You guys are doing remarkable work. Keep it up.
John, you are an absolute powerhouse, and I wish I lived closer to you. I would bug you to hang out with me more and more because just chatting for 30 minutes or whatever it's been for us, it's encouraging and in a sense reminds me that you never know what's on the other side. So it's worth the risk and it's worth the work to see what we can come up with together and individually.
You are very kind, Sean, and Kyle as well. And again, the work that you guys have done and the strength you've shown is a lesson to many, including me. I'm happy to visit with you anytime, Sean.
Right.
I do guarantee you I am never going to live in California. But other than that, love to get together. Come see us out east.
Fair. Thanks for being here today.
Time.
You guys are wonderful. Thank you for everything you do. Stay strong.
John never disappoints. He's a walking encyclopedia, if you will, of always being at the top of his game. I know that metaphor probably doesn't make sense, but I don't even in the backseat of a car, a little bit relaxed in demeanor, but obviously the content he provided is phenomenal. And Kyle, I must say, I don't know if I should take it personally or not, but I feel like John's always got a way to pick on me.
Yeah.
Or maybe I've got a way to pick on it. I'm not sure who to blame here, but I appreciate his down-to-earth personality.
Yeah, he's amazing. And he's another one of those people who switches between regular dude and firm executive very quickly, right? In the matter of nothing. So I love talking to him.
Absolutely. As we do with every episode, we like to wrap with a note of gratitude. We believe expressing gratitude just helps us stay a little bit more grounded in life. So to carry on the theme of just chipping away at things, and when I step back and think about all the different opportunities I've had in life or connections I've had, they've all been for different reasons. And specifically, who comes to mind is BioNews and FriedrichsAtaxiaNews.com. Essentially, they're a news marketing company. But even they play a part. They help keep people educated. They give some individuals and caregivers an outlet for sharing their story. So there's so much more than just marketing and news. So I wanted to say thank you to BioNews and Friedrichs Ataxia News. Even though I don't write for them right now, they've still been and are an influential part of life, and I appreciate that.
Very good. Awesome. My thank you note is along those same lines, Sean. I'm grateful to the Ferris staff and all the different roles that everybody plays. Our staff has grown over the last few years, and everyone's got a very unique personality, a very unique spin they bring to it, and something really specific that they can do to advance the mission. And it takes everyone. And I was struck by this today because we had a new hire, somebody new added to our staff, and everyone went around on our virtual staff meeting and introduced themselves. And I was just like getting emotional listening to how deeply everyone cares and brings themselves to this work. So thank you to the Ferris staff.
Of course, we'll say thank you again to John for joining us today and the work that he's doing in so many areas of life. We encourage you to find our show notes at twodisableddudes.com, where you can find links to many of the things we talked about today. If you're enjoying this show, please share it with a friend. Subscribe on all your favorite podcast apps so you never miss a show. We look forward to talking with you next week. Until next time, keep living with urgency.
Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. This show is possible with your support. Visit twodisableddudes.com to stay connected.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram. And be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast player.